Welcome back to another episode of the Brew Review here at Back Porch Draft House. I know it looks similar, but we're actually in a different location than normal. Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about why we're here in Lawton?
Okay, well, we are in our original location. This one was established in 2012. It was our first location for the business, and honestly, it was our first location in a small market with craft beer, and kind of introducing craft beer into that market.
Yeah, and it just kind of seemed to take off and steamroll its way, down south to Wichita Falls.
Down to Texas.
We're here for a tap takeover that will be happening on February 27th, as our big board says, for Oregon's own Rogue Brewery. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about them and what we've got featured here?
Okay, awesome. Well, we've got Rogue Brewery. They're from Independence, Oregon. This is actually one of my favorite breweries because they do a lot of interesting beers. One of their first beers was brewed in 1987, and that is the American Amber. And we also have the Rogue Dead Guy, which is one of my favorites. It's a Maibach-Hellsbach style. And interesting enough, was one of our first beers when we first opened the Lawton store.
Awesome.
Really
it's
cool.
one of the OGs.
The OGs, yeah.
And
then we have the Brutal IPA, which is, it uses a lot of their homegrown hop varietals. And we have the Sriracha Stout, Sriracha Hot Stout beer, if you're into hot sauce.
That sounds very interesting. I actually can't wait to try that. I've been wanting to try that for a while, so it's awesome that you guys are hosting it up for your tap takeover. Mm-hmm. There's another beer not featured here that's also going to be available on February 27th. Which one is that?
Beard beer.
And why is it called Beard beer?
It is a really interesting one. It's inoculated from the yeast in the brewmaster's beard.
Okay. So like a wild yeast?
Yeah. Technically, it's considered a wild yeast. When you're brewing a beer, you're using bacteria and certain yeast. So he's inoculating that yeast out of his beard, which is kind of weird, and that rhymes. But that's what makes the beard so interesting. So it's a wild ale.
So going back to the beers that we've got going on February 27th, American Ale. This one is the very first beer. How is it going to taste?
This one is going to be an entry-level beer. It's really kind of medium on the ABV side. It's 5.5% alcohol by volume. It's also 53 IBUs. So if you're an entry-level craft beer drinker, this one is a great one to start with. Also because it was one of their first. You're going to get a really good taste of what Rogue is about. Lots of malty caramel notes, very easy, smooth finish. This is an awesome one to start with. I'm going to taste it too.
Yeah.
This one actually reminds me of their hazelnut brown nectar. It has some like really nutty undertones, which I feel like I'm getting from the malt. What about you?
It's everything about this beer tastes like a classic American ale. As you said, there's kind of like the hazelnut undertones to it. It's really smooth, kind of sweet, but not like sweet that you would think that some beers where it's almost kind of like drinking like a flavored one.
Right.
The American Ale is a great beer to start out with.
For sure. The next one that we're gonna try is the Rogue Dead Guy. This one is like a little step up on the Richter scale in terms of light to dark and flavor profile. It's a Hellsbach Maibach style, so if you're into maybe drinking like a Shinerbach or a Sam Adams, this one's gonna be kind of similar. And getting into an entry-level craft beer still. It is 6.5 alcohol by volume, so we're gonna take a step up on the booziness factor, and it's 40 IBUs. So this is actually one of my favorites from Rogue, outside of their Rogue Hazelnut Nectar. It's a brown ale, but what do you think?
This is one of Rogue's beers that I've actually had before, and it is a personal favorite of mine. Like you said, it's a little bit up on the boozy factor, but you say boozy, some people might think that, oh, it's heavier, but no, it's still as clean, still as crisp and refreshing as the American Ale. And it's, like you said, kind of got that little Shinerbach type flavor to it.
Yeah.
But, with their own twist on it, obviously growing their own hops, malts, all that stuff, it's going to have its own flavor. It's
for
great.
Sure.
Definitely a must try when you come here. I think it's a really good beer for people to try at the Tap Takeover as their Rogue's flagship beer. While you've got interesting things like a hot sauce put into a beer, you can really tell a lot about a brewery by their flagship beer, and this is a great representation of what Rogue is about.
And for our viewers, if you're looking at what you might like and what you might be interested in getting into, I would like to point out that the Dead Guy isn't as sweet as the Amber. So if you do like sweeter beers, I would go for the Amber. If you're into something that's not as sweet and really is comparable to like a Shiner Bach or a Sam Adams, then I would get into the Rogue Dead Guy. So I want to get into the awesome hop varietals that they're growing, and they're in Oregon in the rain shadow of Fort Hood and in the heart of Willamette Valley. They've got this awesome farm. They grow all sorts of things like hazelnuts, honey. We're talking 7 hop varietals, and when we're getting into this brutal IPA, they're using the alluvial hops that they grow there, and it takes about 48 hours for them to really cultivate all these hops. They use large kilns to dry them out and preserve them, and it's a really awesome process, super organic.
It sounds like it, and it definitely tastes like it.
Yeah.
This IPA has a little bit of like a more citrusy taste to it. I know with certain IPAs you can get a little hop flavor to it and it kind of overpowers, but it's just as flavorful as it is hoppy.
Yeah.
This is, unfortunately, does not live up to its namesake of being brutal. This is probably one of the smoothest IPAs I think I've ever had here or elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, this one's actually only going to be 46 IBUs, and if you've tuned into our previous episodes, we've talked about how the human palate can only really taste up to 120 IBUs. So this being 46, that should tell you kind of where you are on the Richter scale, and it's only 6.2% ABV.
That's really cool, because these days you have people trying to make big hop bombs and just driving that number up there, but to do one that's a little bit lower on the IBU scale and as clean and tasty as this one is, that's a pretty good seal of approval for me for what they're doing.
Absolutely. I get a lot of like butter and citrus flavors in this one. It's good.
Yeah, buttery kind of is a nice, it sounds like something you wouldn't associate with beer term, but it does fit this pretty well. It's just kind of.
So it's not brutal.
It's not brutal, but it does sit on your tongue a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, cool.
Now we're down to the big one, the one I can't wait to.
You're excited.
I'm very excited to try this beer. Tell me a little bit more about it.
Okay, so this is the Sriracha Hot Stout beer. It says on the bottle, I put Sriracha in my Rogue. So, and I think you have Sriracha somewhere too, don't you?
Oh, yeah, I keep Sriracha everywhere, in my house, in the office, in my bag, swag. I like spicy stuff, so I'm really excited to hear how they get this collaboration to happen.
So we're using the same kind of Sriracha that we all know, with the green cap and the red bottle. And actually this one they use the Rogue sun-ripened ingredients, so everything about this is a really awesome beer. If you like spicy stuff, this pairs well with any kind of food. Chinese food, soups, burgers, sweets I would even pair it with. What do you think?
I can't get over how much this smells like Sriracha right now.
Ooh, so spicy. Well, this one is only 5% ABV, and it is a stout. So we're not talking like a pepper ale here. This is Sriracha added into a stout, 5.7 ABV, and only 55 IBUs. So if you're not into a total hot bomb, and you do like, is it sweet? You picking up sweet?
I'm picking up a little bit of note of sweet, almost like with stouts, kind of you think of chocolate. Getting a little bit of that, and right at the end is when you can feel, I wouldn't describe it as heat, but the Sriracha bite,
okay,
so to say. That's how they get it in there. I think it's actually really well done. It's a pretty smooth transition to giving you that little bit of sweet and spicy, and it's not sour, it's not hoppy. It goes down pretty smooth.
It's kind of, I would honestly say it's kind of roasty, and I do pick up on the chocolate. You're getting more pepper, maybe like a Mexican like hot chocolate or a mole.
That actually explains that very well.
But
I like that description.
Just a hair more pepper to it, but it's not. You're not gonna like have to chug a bottle of water after this or anything. This is a really cool beer if you're trying to mix it up.
I think I'm gonna take another sip of this before we move on. I'm a fan.
Awesome.
I'm a fan.
Now that we have tried all of them, let's go through and give our verdict.
Okay.
So the American Amber, I'm going to give a thumbs up.
I agree. Thumbs up for me as well. It's a pretty classic American ale, but it's still very crisp. Moving on to the Dead Guy Ale, mugs up for me.
I'm going to agree, especially with Back Porch, because this is like our day oneer beer. So definitely a thumbs up for me as well. So starting with the Brutal IPA, I'm going to give this one a mugs up because I really feel like it has some nice buttery undertones, And for me, I just don't like an overly excessively hopped beer. So
understandable.
mugs up for me.
I'm giving it a mugs up as well. And moving on to the last beer, the Rogue Sriracha. I am still slightly feeling the burn from it. I think it's set in a little bit more now that I've let it set on my, my palate. I'm gonna have to give this one a slip slowly just for that reason, because if you're not into hot, spicy stuff, if you don't have hot sauce in your bag, it's not gonna be an enjoyable experience for you.
No.
But if you like spicy stuff, if you like really good stouts, this is gonna be a good beer. Definitely, take a walk on the wild side and try this. Really inventive beer. Sip slowly.
For sure. I'm gonna have to do the same. So if you liked any of these beers, you can find them next week, February 27th at the Lawton Back Porch at 1925 West Gore Boulevard, Suite C, from 4 p.m. to close. And we'll be here, and we also have the Beard Beer.
I think that about wraps up this episode of the Brew Review. Until next time, from my favorite from this episode, I think, is the Brutal IPA. What about you?
I'm gonna do the Dead Guy,
Well,
for sure.
since we're kind of crisscrossed right here, why don't we do a little switch? Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.